Hi, and welcome to our podcast, Learning Leading Now, where we talk all things education in Mobile County Public Schools. I'm your host, Sally Erickson. I'm the Community Engagement Specialist in the Office of Communication here at Mobile County Public Schools, joined by
Mike Herndon, Public Relations Specialist with Mobile County Public Schools.
And our special guest,
Virginia Guy, the Executive Director of the Drug Education Council.
Welcome, Virginia.
Thank you so much.
It's great to have you with us to talk about all the wonderful things that the Drug Education Council does for our kids. Let's start by talking about the history of the Drug Education Council.
Right. We were formed over 50 years ago, actually, as a residential program. We were the first residential treatment program in the state of Alabama. Over the course of time, our board recognized the need to do prevention, so we turned our treatment program over to the Salvation Army, and we went full-time into prevention probably about 30 years ago. So we've got a long history of working with the Mobile County Public School System and have enjoyed that and feel like there's a lot to do in keeping kids away from the harms of drugs.
Well, I think maybe a lot of people don't realize all of the great programs that the Drug Education Council does and all the resources available to them. So I thought it'd be good for us to kind of go over some of those things, maybe starting with the Red Ribbon Week program, which is geared toward elementary age children and encourages community service. Can you tell us a little bit about how that started and how children are selected for it?
Right. The Red Ribbon program is a national program that was started by the DEA families years ago, and it is the largest, longest running prevention program in the nation. Now, locally, we have taken that program, and instead of having it a week, which most people recognize Red Ribbon as Red Ribbon Week, we have made it a year-long leadership program. We partner with the superintendent, and every school selects a Red Ribbon leader. So we've got the younger kids in elementary, the middle school, and the high school. They select a leader at the beginning of the school based on that child's character. And so then we challenge them to lead Red Ribbon Week activities on their campus during Red Ribbon Week in October, and then to conduct a community service project. So they have to implement a community service project, and they have until about March or April to finish those projects, and they turn all of their information in, and then we award cash scholarships to the best projects for high school seniors, and we have family package prizes for the K through 11 students. And it's always amazing to me, the projects that these young people come up with. This year, our theme was supporting veterans and first responders. And the students just did some amazing projects. In fact, your Baker High School senior won the overall high school scholarship for that. So we're real proud of that program. We know that the strongest way to prevent a child from using drugs is to bond them with their community, if they're bonded with their school and their community. And this is a program that really bonds them. So we're proud of it. And, we get a lot of what I call bang for the buck on that program.
That's fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit about some of your early intervention initiatives that are geared more toward older children?
Right. We do what I call prevention, intervention, and recovery support. So our Red Ribbon and our school classroom presentations are basic primary prevention. But we know that in spite of our best efforts, some kids are going to experiment, through peer pressure or, feeling, uncomfortable with their feelings, wanting to change the way they feel. And then also it's just normal adolescent development for risk-taking and that kind of thing. So what we want to do is we want to intervene if we know that a child is intervene as early as we can and bring every resource we can to bear to stop that drug use, because we know that 90% of addiction begins in the teen years. So the sooner we can intervene and stop that use. So we've got a program that we also partner with the Mobile County Public School System with called the CAP program. And that's a program where first offenses, if they violate any of the student code of conduct in the drugs section, then they and their parent have to attend the program. And, we have that program at night. It's 8 hours of instruction, 4 consecutive Thursday nights. And, it's interesting to see that program because the first night the parents don't want to be there and they're embarrassed and they're angry. And, by the fourth night, they're saying, why didn't we know about this before? My child got in trouble. So what we want to do is help those families establish better communication, establish what their rules are and consequences for the rules, and to be more consistent, and just to encourage, and then also to provide them with the other resources in the community. There's a lot of resources to help parents.
Well, and May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so I feel like all of this kind of ties in with those types of initiatives, because I do think a lot of students who get into experimentation are also experiencing some type of mental health crisis.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that's changed in my career. When I first started, almost everybody who was getting involved in drugs were doing it partying and, peer pressure and everything. Now that's really not the case. When we talk to these students, they report stress, they report anxiety and depression. More often than not, they're using to change the way they feel. And, we need to really help them, first of all, identify with their feelings, learn healthy behaviors for those feelings. And also, if we identify early, again, a mental health issue, we can refer to the appropriate resources and get them the help so that they can go ahead and successfully finish high school and go and launch on into, college or career.
Well, it's also a crisis in terms of students who just feel bullied or feel disenfranchised somehow from their peers or from their community. So it's a sad thing to think about the resources that they turn to when they have so many wonderful outlets that they could be engaging in, such as sports. So, but let's talk a little bit about some of the other programs that the Drug Education Council does in terms of maybe things that the general public doesn't know about besides just resources for parents. What do y'all do in terms of going into the schools or working with teachers or even just having informational sessions?
Right. We are available for teacher and service training. We can do it in groups. We can do it in schools. We can do it, we work a lot during the summer months, doing those. We can provide the continuing ed that professionals need for their own licenses and certifications. So we can provide that. We are NBCC certified, so we can provide those services for the professionals. We also work one-on-one with families. So if a family, we know that every family has unique situations, unique resources. So we can work with the family. So if anybody is worried about anybody in their family, it could be their grandfather, it could be their child, it could be anybody, call us. That service is, we don't charge for that. And we can connect them with the right resources and let them know all of the resources available to them. There's nobody I have ever met yet in all of my years that meant to become addicted. Nobody means to become addicted, whether they start out partying or they start out, treating, some type of mental health issue. Nobody means to become addicted. It's not their fault. We know that it's a brain disease. We know a lot more about the brain and how drugs impact the brain today than we ever have before. So, sometimes it's just educating parents and educators and people interested in children. We believe that everybody has a responsibility to promote healthy choices and help children, whether it's your neighbor's children, children from church, your family, everybody can help promote those healthy choices and make a better environment for kids to grow up.
And as long as you've been doing this, surely you've seen people come into some of these programs like the CAP program and seen them come out the other side onto great success. That must be, do you run across people like that in town all the time? And how gratifying is that for you to see?
Right. I think that, through traditional media and everywhere, we always hear the tragedies and the negative things. But there are so many people, more often than not, we can prevent kids from ever using. What I call it is delaying. The longer we can delay the onset of use, we know that if somebody begins using at 14, they have a 47% chance of becoming addicted. If that same person waits until they're about 20, 21, it drops down to 9%. So the longer we can delay the onset of use, the less likely your child will become addicted, and they'll be able to have what I call a healthy relationship with alcohol and drugs the rest of their lives. We also know that if kids start experimenting, if they start using, we can intervene before it develops into an addiction, and that happens all the time. The CAP program's a perfect example. The majority of our students do not offend the second time. So that's an extremely successful program. We've had it evaluated over the years by faculty from the University of South Alabama, and we're always putting that information back into the front end of the program. So the program's continuing to evolve to meet the needs of the community and the families that we serve. And then we know if somebody has developed addiction, we can also intervene and get them the treatment that they need and get them into a life of recovery. So there's more success out there than there is failure, and I think people need to know that. Now, the failure is tragic. In fact, I tell people all the time, today is the most dangerous time I have ever seen for street drug use. There is nothing that you get off the internet or on the street that can be considered safe now. Drugs, we know from the DEA and law enforcement that the majority of the drugs out on the street are tainted. And a lot of the pills, like a lot of times kids will want, Adderall or some of those, they'll buy them on the street. A lot of those, the drug dealers know how to press those pills. You cannot look at them and tell the difference in that pill and a pharmaceutically made pill. So unless you've gotten it from a prescription from a legitimate pharmacy, you need to consider it tainted. Particularly anybody who has folks going off to college. The college campuses nationwide are having a tremendous problem with the fake pills out there that can have a deadly amount of fentanyl or carfentanil in them. It's very, very dangerous. So we want everybody to know that and really talk to their children about not taking anything they didn't get from a prescription for them and a legitimate pharmacy. It's just way too dangerous now.
And because the fentanyl, just trace amounts of that could be deadly even, right? Right.
We hear stories all the time that very, very small amount, amount you can put on the end of a pencil lead, it can be considered, lethal. And, that's the other thing. We're seeing people die from using drugs that aren't addicted. There's a program we do called One Pill Can Kill. And, where you can just be, you can take a pill from, you can have a headache and, somebody down the hall from you can say, well, I've got something, and give it to you. And, that could be a pill. They didn't mean to give you something that was that dangerous. They didn't know. So by the time it gets down to the end user, just anything, I can't stress that enough. And, a lot of young people get drugs online. All of those need to be considered very dangerous.
Something that may not be as dangerous, but we're certainly seeing a lot of use of these days is vaping. Kind of talk about where that's at.
That's been what I've been working on mostly this year, because when vaping started, it was not regulated because it was really developed as an e-cigarette, and it was intended to be a way to stop smoking. And so, everybody believed anything that would help somebody stop smoking was a good thing. So it kind of got out on the market. And so it was going fine. Kids weren't really interested in it. We had smoking levels way down. In fact, it's been a long time since, we found packs of cigarettes on a school campus. It became so uncool to smoke. And then some brilliant guys, but I could kill them, out of Stanford, developed the Juul, which was the really cool e-cigarette that could be, it looked like a flash drive. It had the little pods. It charged on your computer. The first time I saw it, I thought, that is really cool. And so all of the kids started using that. And that surged. That was all nicotine. That surged them back using nicotine. Since that time, it's evolved so that now kids aren't really juuling that much anymore, but they're using the disposable vapes. And a lot of times those vapes don't even have nicotine in them. They have THC, they have CBD, they have Delta 8. Some of them have even had fentanyl in them. So these devices, so we worked with the state legislature this year, and as of October 1st, it's going to be illegal for a child to even possess a vape, no matter what's in it. It can just have orange juice, it can have nothing in it. So we realized that the device had become a drug delivery device. And so instead of law enforcement and school administrators having to confiscate the devices, figure out whether it's nicotine, THC, or whatever, just the device itself now, statewide, is going to be illegal. So that's going to really help our schools, particularly our schools in Mobile. That is just going to be flat illegal for the kid to even have it in their possession. So we think that'll help keep our kids safe. And then we're ramping up our education with kids, because we've started not just in Mobile but nationwide seeing kids as young as 7, 8, and 9 vaping.
Oh, geez.
Well, they've played with electronic devices their whole life. The vape industry came out saying it's safer than tobacco. So what kids heard is that it was safe. And so they start, and they were just playing. Elementary administrators and educators tell me that they don't really, little kids don't really perceive it as drug use. They perceive it as playing with an electronic device. Now, then when you get a little bit older, they're doing it intentionally for whatever substance it has in it. And then more and more, we're working with teenagers that have already become addicted if they're vaping nicotine. A vape gives you more nicotine than even a cigarette does. So, it'd be like asking any of us who had grandparents who smoked, they couldn't go all day without a cigarette. So what was having trouble is, the kids really couldn't go all day without a vape, just because they go into nicotine withdrawal and stuff. So we've got some vaping cessation programs too that we're doing with those students that have already become addicted. Again, those are very successful. We can use patches and different things to wean the kids off and get them so that, again, we can keep their lungs healthy and keep them safe and keep them in school.
You mentioned CBD earlier. That's something else we're seeing a lot more of with the gummies and different things. What should parents know about that?
Right. Again, that's not regulated. And the CBD itself actually has some benefits and not a lot of negatives. But unfortunately, the majority of the CBD that's sold also has THC in it. And that has a lot of the negatives in it. That's the psychoactive ingredient. And we see it a lot, too, with adults that are in drug testing programs, that work for huge companies that do these big drug testing, where they really thought they were just taking CBD gummies and different things to maybe help their back or their knees or whatever. Their intention was good, but that CBD had a THC level that was high enough to make them, fail a drug screen. And so now they're in trouble because of that. Again, there's so much now unintentional negative consequences, that's very different. That's why we really want to educate the public, make sure they know those dangers. There's also Delta 8. Delta 8 is it's the THC that's in hemp. And when that farm bill was passed, and everybody started doing hemp, and then they started manufacturing everything, that has become problematic. Because Delta 8 is very close to Delta 9, which is marijuana THC. So they're kind of sister plants and, can cause a lot of problems. So we're working to get those particularly out of the hands of young people. Our main goal is to keep these things out of the hands of young people so we can delay, and get that child's brain fully developed and, so that they can then have a normal relationship with alcohol and drugs the rest of their life.
Well, getting into alcohol, I just remember hearing about parties in Gulf Shores and Orange Beach years ago where the parent for spring break would rent a condo, or it was a family condo, and all the kids would just go down there and spend the week. And they would just party out the wazoo. I don't know if that is happening so much anymore, but can you talk a little bit about some of the issues you're seeing with like that, where parents just think, oh, as long as they're doing it at home, it's no big deal?
Right. Well, alcohol for years always has been, one of the number one drugs of choice, and it's been dangerous for kids. I think that people, parents, a lot of times grew up in a time when drugs weren't quite as dangerous, and they really felt like, drinking was sort of a rite of passage. We didn't understand the developing brain. Now that we know about the developing brain, we know very different things happen in the brain of a 14-year-old who drinks alcohol than maybe his 35-year-old father who drinks alcohol. Because when the brain is not fully developed until the early 20s, and so it's not the same. And so we want, even if mom and dad are drinking, we don't want, it still is not safe for the child to drink. So I don't think there's quite as, it's still going on. There's a lot of drinking at hunting camps and beach houses and those kind of things. But we're more and more educating the public about how that is really leading to a lot of the addiction that we're seeing. And actually, that was one of the causes of a lot of the overdose deaths that we're seeing. Folks don't just wake up at 25 or 30 using heroin and fentanyl. It starts in those teenage years, smoking weed and drinking alcohol. And the receptors in the brain that you carry the alcohol and the marijuana are very close to each other. And so if you damage that part of the brain, then you set the brain up for addiction. You may get the child out, and then maybe when you hear stories of when they were 22 and they had dental surgery and they took an opioid and boom, they're addicted. See, the brain was actually set up for addiction early on. And so the more we know about the brain, the more we can protect our children. So I think parents are better able to make good decisions and maintain rules and not do we did it and, we made it and it's, everybody's doing it. I hear that all the time. But, back then we didn't know it was as dangerous as it was. There's people my age who can remember when kids didn't have to be in car seats. It didn't make it safe. We just didn't know it. Now we know that it's safer to protect your child that way. We know now that we've, babies on their tummies, flip them over. We didn't know that. So as we learn these things, we do change our behavior. And so I think that's very true with what we know about the brain and what we know about the dangers of that early use. So whether that child is drinking alcohol, on their parents' private property or drinking with their buddies at a field party, it's still, the brain doesn't know the difference. The brain is still going to be negatively impacted. So, once we get parents really do feel more empowered to set better limits to keep their children safe when they know the science that's behind it.
Well, so can you talk a little bit about some of the warning signs of a child getting into trouble with addiction? What are some of the lesser known things that a parent should look for? How can parents kind of get ahead of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's one of the hardest things too. Now, a lot of times parents really do, I believe parents know their children better than anybody. They've known them from day one and they've been paying attention to them and everything. So parents know what causes their child anxiety, what makes their child scared, what makes their child happy, all of those kind of things. I think it's just staying hyper vigilant. I think what happens is parents, by the time a child gets to be about 13 or 14, parents are exhausted. And so they are just flat out exhausted because it's difficult raising a child. So sometimes it's easier to kind of back off, to ignore, something thinking, well, they're going to grow out of it, they'll age through it. Maybe
particularly when you get to the second and third child, they're exhausted.
Exactly. Well, exactly. That's
Well,
absolutely.
and plus that's the age where they tend to get really, really moody and difficult, and they go into their rooms and shut the door.
And think they know more than you.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Right. And what is normal teenage behavior and what needs to, so I think it's just, I say, it's almost like you've got to kick it into that higher gear during that time. You've only got a few more years, but really pay close attention, talk to your child even more. Research shows that the number one reason when kids are interviewed about why they didn't do drugs, like if they grew up and they didn't do drugs, the number one reason they say is their parents and another adult cared about them and they would have disappointed them. Sometimes it's a coach, sometimes it's an art instructor, sometimes it's, you hear all the time, particularly men saying, I didn't drink, I would have gotten kicked off the football team or the track team. My coach wouldn't have liked it, that kind of stuff. I didn't want to disappoint my parents. So kids really do, even if they're rolling their eyes and they're acting, like they're not paying attention. They're watching parents and adults that they care about, and they're emulating their behavior, and they're really not wanting to disappoint those. So those are the key things to make sure that your children are connected to you and to other adults that really care about them. And that will really protect kids going forward. And then, but the things to look for are change in dress and behavior. Change in friends is a big thing. I think, a lot of times knowing your child's friends and knowing their parents. See, that 14, 15, 16 is about the time kids get kind of independent when they're little. In order to get together, you have to know their friends' parents, and they get a little more independent, particularly about the time they go to high school. They meet new people. Maybe you don't know their parents. I think it's making an effort to know what they're doing and really watching kids who start to isolate. I think social media and electronic devices are wonderful ways. They came out so that we would be better connected. And what we're finding out now in mental health is it's actually separating us some from the relationships that we had. So it's kind of an interesting thing that's happened as electronic devices and social media has evolved. And I was meeting with some parents of young children that they were like preschool heading into elementary, talking about not allowing their children to have devices until they are certain ages, not letting them on social media and they were having this debate and trying to bond together about, what if we all say not until 14 or not until 13 or whatever. And I think those kind of strategies, so if parents can connect while they're connected anyway at those little bitty ages and then follow that on through, we can protect our kids, because we had no idea that these devices were going to end up separating, causing so much danger, and then there's predators out there that, and then the bullying, we mentioned bullying earlier. Bullying's been around forever, but it's really escalated with, with electronic devices, because, it used to, you'd have to spread stuff around to school and everything. And, now, with just a little click.
It's a lot easier.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate everything that the Drug Education Council is doing to help our kids, and especially your work with staying on top of all of these different dangers that just always seem to be cropping up every single day. So thank you for being with us, Virginia.
Thank you. And I appreciate the school. When you open your doors in the morning, every single social problem walks in. And so you don't just have to educate, you also have to deal. So I appreciate what you do. You do a remarkable job every day. Thank you.
Oh, well, we love our kids so much.
And thank you.
All right, that's all the time we have. So thank you for listening. And we'll see you next time, or we'll hear you next time on Learning Leading Now.
There's a lot to like about Mobile County Public Schools.
What I enjoy about Mobile County School is the extra attention my teachers give us to help us learn.
Teachers are liking their access to technology, and students are liking the quality of their education.
I like the technology that's been incorporated into my education.
And since 1826, you have trusted us to prepare your child for their future, and we like that. Mobile County Public Schools. We are learning today, leading tomorrow.